Hey guys, Timothy Roberts here. In this video, I'm going to take you through the process of hand forming the bells on these blanks. The last video I posted was about bells, what they do to the sound of the cymbal, and I highlighted hand-formed bells and pressed bells, talked about each one, kind of the sonic benefits of each one, and now we're going to dive into actually hand-forming a bell on a totally flat bronze blank. So what I've done is I've pulled, looks like 6 blanks, and I've marked the center hole on them. So I have a little jig that I use to find the approximate center, because these things are not perfectly round. They've got bumps, and you kind of have to find the best center you can, knowing that once the cymbal is shaped, I'll edge it and get it to a perfect circle. Then what I do is I pop a little divot in the center, and this is going to allow me to outline the border of my bell, and from there we'll be off to the races. So I've got some approximately 21-inch sized blanks, 2 approximately 22-inch sized blanks, and then 2 23-inch approximate size. They're going to be cut down pretty much a full inch, so these 21s are going to be 20s, so on and so forth. And I pulled 2 of each because I wanted to show the formation of one of the half flats, and then also one of just a standard size bell. If you look at kind of the market, you'll see that the most standard size bell on most cymbals is going to be about 5 inches to 5.5 inches in circumference. And I don't usually like to go beyond that at all, because the bigger that bell, I said this in the last video, but the bigger the bell, the more I have to hammer it to get it into the shape, the more I'm stretching the material and I'm thinning the material out, which just means that if I don't have a heavy enough blank, then that bell is going to get stretched too thin before I've even gone to the lathe at all, and it doesn't give me much room to do anything on the lathe. And thin bells really they sound hollow, and they don't cut near as much. And thin bells on the extreme are incredibly integrated, meaning that you hit the bell and the body of the cymbal is activating as well. So integrated is a great sound, but you want that that level of integratedness, if that's a word. You want that dialed appropriately. So for jazz guys, a lot of times they want a little bit of an integrated bell. And for rock and roll guys, you want a separated bell, meaning the bell is just going to have a super clear cutting tone, and it's not going to activate the body of the cymbal, the wash, the sustain. You want those sounds separated. So with that, let's dive in. I'm going to start by taking this one here and marking out where I want my bell to be. So the other thing I didn't say about this is I did 2 of each for 2 different bells, but also they're 2 different thicknesses of blank, or 2 different weights. So I've got 1.2 millimeter thick, and then a 1.3 millimeter thick. So what that's going to allow me to do, the 1.3 millimeter is the heavier blank, which I'm going to use to create the bigger bell. So the thinner blank, the 1.2 mil thickness blanks, are going to get the small half flat bell. And the reason for this is, with those thinner blanks, like I'd said, if they're thin and I stretch them out a lot, you get a hollow bell sound. But with thinner blanks, I can get away with a smaller bell, and I can still have a pretty clear sound on the bell when you hit it. But I'm doing more of the flat ride thing, which flat rides can be a lot thinner and maintain stick clarity. So that's a huge thing for just for stick definition. That's something that drummers talk about all the time, is stick definition on their cymbal. And a lot of guys that are really into handmade cymbals, they love the thin, nuanced stuff, but they also want clarity in the stick sound. So that's a challenge, because on the extremes, a thin blank or thin cymbal's not going to have stick definition unless care is taken in the manufacturing process to make sure that it will. So all that to say, with these thinner blanks, I'm putting a smaller bell into it, which I know I can get away with that and still have a clear-ish sounding bell, even though it's really small, and then the stick is going to be plenty good on the body of the cymbal. So, all right, so with this one, when I actually mark out the certain diameter. So I punched the hole on the top, and I'm going to use this guy to just scratch a little line. And this is going to be designated my top surface. This is going to be designated the bottom. The reason for that is when I scratch the line, I'm going to hammer a heavy ring on top of that line, and that's going to give me my border to the bell. This is another thing that's hugely important, is the transition from the bell to the body of the cymbal. If that transition kind of slopes and is pretty gradual, you're going to have more of an integrated sound. If that transition is hard and you have this like drastic change from the bell to the body, then you're going to separate the sound of the bell more. So when I go in and I hammer that top ring, depending on how hard I hammer it and then the technique in which I use on the underside, I can create either a slope or a hard line with that transition, which is all about dialing in just how integrated or separated the bell sound is. So this is one of the 1.2 mil blanks, so this is going to be a half flat. So what I do with this is I go for very small bell size. Usually I'll come over here, grab a hi-hat that I'm working on, and this one has a bell. This is like a 15, almost 16 inch hi-hat cymbal. This has like a hi-hat bell on it. This is a perfect half flat sized bell. So usually I'll just come in here, and it's not an exact science. Could be, but it's just not really the way that I work. So I'll come over here and just roughly give myself the half point on this this bell size, and then this can be, I can keep this locked in, and this can be what I use for scratching out the lines. So now we're going to transition into me hammering on the cymbal. So I'm going to change the camera angle so you guys can see pretty well, and I'll stop throughout the process, but this is going to be a go till you're done kind of video. So I'm going to be hammering big time until I've got bells on all these cymbals, and I might speed some of it up, I might keep it the way it is, but we'll see. So let's jump into it. All right, so you saw I went around that circle 3 times. When I go around this many times and I use that much force with that kind of hammer, this is the kind of bell border I'll make when I want to do a really separated bell sound, so more of a hard ankle from the bell into the body. So I do that, gives me this kind of look here, and then when you flip it over, and you can kind of see it's sort of making a bell in this direction. So now I'm going to come in, hammer here, and push the metal back out, and then we're really going to start to see that bell form. All right, so a couple things on this. You noticed I am getting out close to that line that's from the that's hammered on the underside or the other side of the cymbal. Getting close to that line. Oftentimes, cymbal makers will use blank space or empty space and use the stretch that occurs here, because this hard line and then this hammering is essentially, you know, pulling the metal tight. So even though that doesn't have any hammering in that little ring in between, there's still a good amount of tension being held there. So I can leave that space and continue to build it, or I can go right up to it and I can do this method that utilizes basically hammering a ring on top of the other ring from the underside, if that makes sense. So basically getting out to this side and start hammering just on like the top half of this heavy band. And what that'll do is it takes basically it takes the ring on the top and it pushes it up into much more of a sharper much more of an angle, so a much sharper degree of change. The other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to stretch the blank out, and stretching is another way to kind of take a smooth transition and kind of make it harder. So what I'll do here is I'm stretching against this band here, and you can kind of see how it's bulging up, like it starts to bulge up before it hits this ring. And I don't want that. I don't want it to do that. I want there to be, you know, a clear flow right up till this point, and it changes directions at the bell. There are reasons for that, but for now, suffice it to say, it's important to stretch. So we'll come in here and stretch against that band. Go around one time, and now I have a flow right up to my point where it changes. Same on this side too. See? So that gives me a nice trajectory for the metal, and this is also really important in helping shape the rest of the cymbal. So I have made half flats that have a bell this size. So I could technically call this bell finished, drill the center hole, and be done. But I want it a little bit taller. Like I said in the last video, the bigger the bell gets, the more sustain the cymbal has, the more volume the cymbal has. So really, really small bells are wonderful for creating a dynamic, low volume cymbal that doesn't open up too much and get too out of hand. Basically, if you want to take like a flat ride stick definition and add just enough crashability so it gives you a crash, but it's not an overbearing crash, a bell this size would be perfect. But I'm gonna go in, hammer it more, and then you're gonna start to see me eyeballing it to see where the curvature is, and I'll iron out little issues, like if it's flat on one side, if I need to kind of build it out in a uniform way, I'll be using a smaller hammer for that. You can see I went right up to that line and I started hammering over that line. And this has given me a nice transition from the body up into the bell of the cymbal. I still need to do a little bit more stretching. I need to do a little bit more ironing out. The bell kind of has a flat portion here, so I need to raise that up. This is the point where I've got pretty much the shape I want, and it's time for just the fine work to get it really dialed in. that bell is ready to go, ready for the formation of the body, and then the edging, and then the lathing, and then calling it finished. So you can see here I got a nice strong transition from the bell to the body, and you can see that the formation of this bell has taken this flat blank and sort of drawn it up into a shape, because you got all this, it's basically like this bell here is just pulling the metal up. And so it starts me off in a really great place with the body of the cymbal, which this is a difference between hand-formed bells and pressed bells, is typically pressed bells are flat, you know, or they don't tend to bowl as much as flat blanks do. And so when you put the bell into it, you're already kind of pulling it up into the shape, and it can make the shaping of the profile easier. So let's move on to one of the bigger bells, and I'll show you how I do that one. All right, so I got my measurement there. Again, this is super rough. I basically just went up to a pressed bell and kind of went just inside the line of the transition to give myself the kind of bell that I want. Which is slightly undersized, so this is probably close to, if we were to measure this, imagine we're on the 5-inch side rather than the 5.5-inch side. Yeah, we're at just under 5 inches is the size that this bell will be. And I could still draw it up into a nice tall shape and give it enough clarity. I'm choosing, this is one of the 1.3 mil blanks, so this is a heavier blank. So I've chosen a heavier blank to give myself more material so that when I stretch it, it doesn't get too hollow. And then all I gotta do, scratch out my line. And as you can imagine, these bells take a little bit longer, but usually when I hand form a bell, I never go for super tall, conical, high bells. I usually go for low and wide if I'm doing this width. Again, because the more I hammer it, the more I stretch it, the more I run the risk of it being kind of hollow sounding and not clear enough. Basically, I want to give myself a starting point to where if I want to integrate the bell more, I can via lathing. But I don't want to be strapped by the blank itself, and well, the blank's too thin, so I can't lathe the bell at all. I got to keep as much weight on as possible. I don't want to do that, so I want to give myself as much freedom later on in the process to get the exact sound I'm going for.